Hello, and welcome to today's episode of The Church We Dream of. Today, we're going to get pretty practical and we're going to talk about how the size of your church will impact your culture experience of that church. This podcast is a review of the content that Timothy Keller covers in his article, Church Size and Culture. I highly recommend you read it for yourself, glean your own knowledge and wisdom from it. But I can't take credit for this research. I'm going to add a layer of perspective. He talks about numbers specifically, and I'm going to kind of look at it through the lens of what happens, how do we apply this to relationships and our expectations of each other in a church community. So let's dive in. Let's talk about why this content is important. Why does it matter? Why does it matter what you expect of your church, and why does the church size impact that? I've attended many different churches in my life, and they've been lots of different sizes, and so I've gotten to experience a lot of different church cultures. And so one of the things that reading this article really helped me understand was how I can't have the same expectation of a 100-person church as I can of an 800-person church. And I realized that I was experiencing church hurt based on unreasonable expectations of the church because I didn't understand their mission. So let's look at church size and how it can help reduce relational hurt when we understand that the amount of people in the room is going to impact our experience and our culture. And if we have the expectations that we put on an 800-person church, on a 200-person church, it's sort of like expecting a soccer player to be good at basketball. Both are playing sports, both are doing it really well, but we're going to be really confused by the rules because we don't understand the mission of the game. We don't understand the mission of the game. Are we kicking into a net? Are we shooting into a hoop? There's a lot of similarities to very different games. So let's look. The other side of this that I want to look at is if your church has the numbers to be playing soccer, if you will, but they're trying to play basketball, you're going to get really frustrated as a leadership team. You're going to have a lack of clarity. You're going to have some soccer equipment naturally showing up and trying to buy basketball equipment, and nobody knows what game we're playing or what success looks like. It's so important to have clarified goals for what we're trying to do in our church communities. I know we want to leave room for what God's doing, but it's also helpful to know, like, what is God doing? He's giving us information based on how many people are in the room. And we can like reverse engineer what God's doing. It doesn't always have to go from heaven down to us. Sometimes we can go from earth up to heaven. Like, oh, there's 150 people. This is where we're going to start. God can shift things, but for now we're going to play soccer because there's 150 people in the room. When there's 400 people in the room, we'll play basketball. And notice that both sports are good. That's something that I want us to all walk away with, is both sports are good. But I want people, whether you're a church leader or you're attending a church, I want you to be able to pick the church. If you're a church attender, pick the church that's playing the sport that you feel called to play in this season. And if you're a church leader, I want you to be able to look at your church and see the sport that they're called to play and lead them effectively in that sport without feeling the pressure or obligation to play all the sports at the same time, because that's too much. Okay, so let's dive in. The first church size is 0 to 40. 0 to 40 people in your church is what Timothy Keller calls a house church. It's a lot like what we would call small groups today. My husband and I, our family, we're in a small group. We love it. It's definitely less than 40 people. It's more than 2. So my thought is going to be, if there's 2 or more people, you've got some sort of church gathering going on, all the way up to 40. And in this type of group, in this kind of church, a house church like this, you may not even necessarily have an appointed leader. You may have a distribution of leadership. Everyone is going to be involved in leadership decisions. It's going to be very casual. It's going to be very organic. People are going to show up to this church through word of mouth and relationship. Just like, "Oh, I know so-and-so. I like so-and-so. Come on over. Let's have dinner." It's very intimate. The level of discussion that's going to be happening is very personal. It is going to look a lot like, hopefully, it will look a lot like those stepping down from the Bema discussions that we see in the New Testament, where everyone's sharing, everyone's talking. There's a lot of back and forth and wrestling with the scripture. There's so many different ways you can present content. It's going to be very intimate and relational. People are going to be cooking food, like house church, tiny, small. Pros of this community is it's very intimate, highly relational. Cons of this community is there's not a lot of checks and balances because it's really organic. It's really based on the relational and emotional intelligence of the people in the room. And it's going to get very specific and niche to the people in the room. This kind of group is designed to get very specific and focused on meeting the needs of the group, not of the masses, of the group. And that's a really good thing. But if you're trying to meet the needs of the masses, 40 people don't have the resources, the time, or the capacity to do that. So, pros and cons. This unit, the 0 to 40, I think because it's so highly relational, becomes a base unit that we measure the growth of all other church growth out of. Like this unit, I think because we do see it in modeled in Acts, is an incredibly powerful group of people. And I think it's what we long for in terms of community. We all want to be a part of a community of 40 people or less where we can be known and have a lot of relational equity and a lot of investment. So this is an important unit. Standalone is a house church. Now let's talk about 40 to 200 people. What happens when your house church goes really well, let's say, and it grows, it outgrows the walls of a home? So practically, you've already got a practical thing happening here is that from jumping past 40 people, you don't fit in a home anymore. So now you're going to be getting a building. And if you're getting a building, now you have some costs. So now we've got a financial component that naturally comes into play in passing 40 people. And that significantly changes the church in the sense that you're naturally going to have some organic leadership structure start to solidify, like who's in charge of finding the building, who's in charge of turning the lights off. These sorts of things are going to get more practical. Even though it's gotten a little more practical and a little bigger, it's still a highly relational space. The pastor is going to be accessible to every single person in that community on some level, whether you just see them on Sunday morning or you invite them to their home. There's a much higher chance that you're going to have dinner at your pastor's house or your pastor's going to come to your house in a church of 200 people or less. And when a pastor delivers a sermon, there's a high chance that they're going to get direct feedback from people in that community that have the relational equity to have that conversation with them and give feedback because it's such a small community. And because it's such a relational community, that feedback is going to hold weight, may impact the way that the pastor and maybe the pastor is the only official leader in this community, but there's some unofficial leaders. It may impact the direction they choose to take the church because with 200 people or less, you are still highly relational, highly focused on a small group of people. Now, a con of 200 people or less is, again, if you're trying to meet the needs of a large group of people, this kind of church isn't going to have the facilities. And the messaging and the community is going to be very niche to the culture of the people in that room. It's going to attract a niche group of people. It's going to be a little more varied than 40 or less because essentially you've got 40 times 4-ish. So you've got 4 to 5 life groups or mini churches, house churches inside your 200-person church. So people are still having access to small group experiences that are very organic. They don't need to be facilitated. People are just kind of inviting people over for dinner and it happens. But you still have broken this group that was one into 5 pieces. And each of those 5 pieces is going to start specializing in a specific kind of study. Even if the whole church is doing the same study, because they're breaking it down into smaller groups, they're going to walk away with it a little bit differently. And this is a good thing. It brings diversity. These kinds of churches they create a strong sense of belonging. Generally speaking, the stability of the church is through the relationships. It's not through the programs. There may or may not be programs. The programs may come and go, but that doesn't affect the stability of the church because it's relationship-based. Some of the weaknesses of this church community are change is slow. Roles can become territorial. Unwritten rules can really dominate the culture. There may be a lot of unspoken expectations because there's so much close relationship. And because that, any conflict can quickly become very personal. So the strength of this church is the relationship, but the weakness of this church is also relationship. If the church is going to be a direct reflection of how healthy the relationships are. So if we've got escalating conflict, that means that we've got some lack of clear communication, lack of repair in relationship. And so it could be easy to get really, really hurt in a small church. It's easy to get really, really hurt in any size of church. But I think jumping from 40 to 200, you lose some of that closeness and it's harder to kind of keep track. People might slip through and you could have some big wounds happening that no one even knows happened, or you could have big wounds that people know happened and then you've got a church split. So that's kind of where the hard stuff comes in with a 200-person size church. However, success is measured by the fact that relationships are accessible and warm. Conflict is addressed directly instead of passively. New people are welcomed regularly. This kind of church is a of becoming cliquey. But if new people are being welcomed, that's wonderful. There's opportunity for growth in the church. And ministry can't rely on just a few faithful members. In this kind of church, everyone should be carrying a little bit of the load. Otherwise, you're going to burn out. If you've got 2 people taking care of 200 people, it's not going to last very long. There's not going to be room for new people. But if you have a 200-person church where conflict is being handled well, relationships are growing, you've got a distributed work base, everyone's pitching in a little bit, and you're very open to new people, your church is going to grow and it's going to pass that 200 mark. And when it passes the 200 mark, your church culture is going to change again. When your church culture grows into the 200 to 400 category, this is what Timothy Keller calls the medium-sized church range. And there are other people who call this the ideal spot relationally and systematically for a church. It's just small enough that you can maintain close contact and relationships, but it's big enough that you're starting to get structured programs that can make it easier for new people to join the church and have access to smaller communities that make them feel welcome. And the work of the leadership team gets a little more organized and structured. So we're going to have some reduction in potential conflict and territorial roles of leadership because it's more structured now. And we're looking for a little bit more skill. It's less about pure relational equity. And it starts to look at who actually has the skills to do this job well. And let's map it out. We're starting to write job descriptions, if you will. Like, we're getting a little bit more structured, and we've got programs that are sustaining us throughout the year as well. So we've got relational equity, and that's keeping us close together, but we've also got programs that are growing and giving people opportunities to connect. And then, if there was 5 small life groups in the 200-person church, now you've got approximately 10 life groups. So you can start to see also that as you jump past 200 to 400, if your pastor is doing their job well, it means they're going to have to pull back a little bit from some of the availability. Not a lot, but a little bit, because if they have 10 house churches that are underneath their home church, if they've got 10 life groups they're facilitating, which could still be happening pretty organically, but the programs are going to help people plug in, get into those intimate relationships so that they can plug in. They need to be mentoring these life groups, because there's so many. You might have people who are young or new to the community who want more support in facilitating their home life group because they may have people they don't know as well. At this point, it could happen that the life groups start facilitating a shared study just to keep things kind of cohesive, to continue build unity in the church, or you do it individually. It's really like there's so many options, but you could see how this would be a tipping point where it's like, okay, let's all do the same thing for this season just to bring that extra shared unity. Another great thing is that because there's a growing size in ministry opportunities for leadership, there's more opportunities for volunteering, which leads to more opportunities for relationships. So it's just this beautiful, the growth results in more relationship as opposed to pulling away from it, which is just fantastic. Okay, what are the weaknesses of this church size? If the church has grown from like 10, 15 people to 400, at this point, you're going to start to feel like you're losing a bit of your previous identity. Any strong voices from the smaller size church may struggle to adapt to the new culture where relational equity is not enough to make a decision anymore. Decisions are going to start to be pushed towards a smaller group of people just for the sake of getting decisions made. You are going to have potentially inconsistency in program quality because most of them are going to be volunteer driven. So you're going to have someone come in who has 6 months to offer and they're going to run a great thing, but then that program might not be there anymore, or someone comes in to take over and they don't do it as well as the other person because they're doing very volunteer based. So program quality can be inconsistent, which for someone visiting the church can sometimes, if they don't know that going in, it can feel like it's difficult to trust that community. However, it's going to attract a new group of people who loves this medium-sized culture and is excited to find an authentic community. So you're going to have people who are grieving what it used to be, but you're going to have a whole new wave of people coming in, and that is going to cause really fast growth. And because these relationships have been so nurtured, it may be challenging to nurture them fast enough to keep up with the growth. And so we can have some relational tension. One of the other pinch points of this size of church is the fast growth causes financial need. So because you have a small leadership team at a 200-person church, you've got one size team. At a 400-person church, you have a different size team. And because you're moving up the scale, you want to create that consistency in programming that builds trust and connection, but you're not going to be able to afford it, because what happens is when people start attending a church, they may not start tithing right away. They start tithing when they take ownership of the community, potentially. So you're going to have to facilitate as a church somehow the demands of the need for quality programming without the funds to support that. I've heard people say that this is a difficult spot to navigate, even though relationally and programming wise, it's a good spot to be. Financially, it's very difficult. However, churches are able to navigate this well, and health looks like clear communication during times of transition. Because things are happening fast, we're going to communicate as clearly as possible and potentially even try slow some things down so that we can communicate well. A really healthy team is going to manage to form systems in all of this that keeps the relational bonds strong, that learns to balance the growing system with the depth of relationship. A church that's growing like this is going to have healthy volunteer pathways, ways that people feel like they can step in and be a part of something without being required to give too much. Volunteering becomes a way to build relationship, and it's navigated successfully. New members to the church through volunteering programs and small group connection are integrated as like true members of the church within 6 months. So you're keeping track of new people and you're mentoring them significantly through the first 6 months of their attendance at the church. And if you're doing all these things, your church is naturally going to grow into the next step. The next category is what Timothy Keller calls a large church. That's 400 to 800 people. In this church, we've tipped a little bit away from relationships and we're leading hard into systems. We have a lot of great systems, which results in higher quality ministries and programming. You're going to get staff that are potentially getting paid so they have more time to develop their expertise in the role, and they're going to be able to deliver really quality sermons, really quality worship. Your Sunday morning experience is just going to get elevated. I think that for a lot of church leaders, no matter their church size, we picture the 800-person church as ideal. Like, I'm so excited for the day when our worship services and our Sunday mornings look like the 800-person church. They've got the lights, they've got the buttons, their mixers are all fancy and good. And when you walk in on Sunday morning, you're like, oh, that was fantastic. That was a high quality experience. Hopefully you've maintained all the structures that you carried from your 200 and 400 season as a church, where you were able to mentor people through those first 6 months and get them volunteering, and those continue and they're even more established. So now you have people who are able to get plugged in and get mentored. But now the shift into getting people into life groups is going to be a little more structured because you have a different kind of person walking through your door at this point. I'm going to go back and talk about that a little bit, but essentially you've got half the people in the room just want to be there. They're not necessarily looking to participate or support the organization. They're in a time in their spirit walk where they need to be fed. And that's beautiful and good. That's beautiful and good. But it means that they're going to have a hard time plugging into a life group. They're going to need to be pursued. So life groups might be harder. The ratio of life groups to people in the church is probably going to be lower. That doesn't mean that the church is doing anything wrong. It's just a reflection of the type of person in the room. And ideally, we want everybody plugged into a 40 or less community, but just knowing that in an 800-person church, people may need time to warm up to that idea, and they may need emotional healing, or they may need to be deliberately pursued in order to get into that life group community. And that's going to take more time. It's going to take more than 6 months to get someone walking through the door into a life group. So one of the weaknesses of a church this large is that people can feel unseen unless they initiate plugging themselves in. In a church this size, you no longer have personal access to the lead pastors and sometimes not even some of the head leadership. We're not having dinner with the pastor in an 800-person church. It's not realistic or safe or wise for the pastor to facilitate that Sunday morning experience. He has shifted from being a specialist in relationship to a specialist in systems, and now he's a specialist in management at the 800-person level. The people that he was mentoring before in the 400-person church, they're now mentoring their own 100 people. So it's not that that particular relationship has grown distant. It's potentially stayed the same, but the distance between the person walking through the door and the pastor has grown because there's just literally more people between them and that pastor. And the reason that they like the church is because all of those people are between them and the pastor. All of those people facilitate making sure that that person has a good experience when they walk through the door on Sunday. But for some people walking into that kind of church, they can interpret that potentially as being an inauthentic or unavailable leader, which can be frustrating. If you've been with this church since it was a living room church and you're now here when it's an 800-person church, you are going to have to go through a process of grieving the fact that the mission of your church has changed. Because remember how I talked about how that living room church is highly relational, highly vulnerable, lots of discussion. As you're jumping up to that 800-person church, the message is going to have to become more general and vague because there's so many people listening in order to minister in a healthy way. And the structures are there to keep everyone safe. So you're going to lose some of that intimacy. You're going to gain access to large numbers of people. Remember how that small group of people couldn't minister to 800 people? This 800-person church can, but they can't have one-on-one conversations with every single person in the room. They can welcome 800 people to dinner. They can welcome 800 people into the presence of God at the same time through a fantastic worship service and a great message, but they can't have one-on-one conversations immediately. Like immediately I'm walking through the door. That's going to have to be facilitated as an additional step. So what is the measure of success of an 800-person church? Small groups are thriving and accessible. I know that this is something that larger churches really struggle with, and that may be because you are successful as an 800-person church because you're good at systems, and small groups are relational. So you need to have somebody on the staff that is focused on cultivating that small group relational culture, which is a big job. Staff and volunteers are communicating consistently. Communication. Who do we talk to? When do we talk to them becomes very important in this size of a church. People don't fall through the cracks. You have an entire team of people. Like welcome committee is a big deal. This can't be left to an organic process anymore. There are too many people coming through the door. So there's like a specific team that works on welcoming and connecting. You essentially have you've got your head pastor, but then I would almost picture it as you've got a bunch of welcome pastors who are pastoring on a more personal and relational level. Staff and leaders, because this becomes a more structured position, they have regular time off. They feel like their job description is clear. They're not dabbling in too many things. Distribution of workload is clear because so much intentionality and quality needs to be put into each section that division of labor and rest becomes very important. So when those things are done successfully, the staff are happy and the church continues to grow. So what happens when an 800-person church continues to grow? Now we're entering into the last size that Timothy Keller outlines, which is very large or mega church. At a mega church level, you are highly specialized and excellent. These are the churches that are like producing not just for inside their church, but their content is going out of their church as well. And they're starting to minister in like a commercial platform in the social media world. We're starting to hear their music. We're starting to hear their sermons. Like they have so much content that it's actually starting to go out. They have very healthy and established ministries for every age, children's, youth, women's, men's, and they're very structured. You have so many healthy departments meeting the needs of every niche community and age that comes into your church. You have a strong outreach capacity because you have so many divisions of strong leadership that can focus ministry outward. And they have, so like in the 400 to 800 church, it was like, we've got 4 funnels leading in. Now you've got, your funnels are creating funnels. You see, it's like, now we've got lots going up. So we've got so much going up that we can actually come out the top and go out. Does that make sense? Like we have so much talent, so much vision, so much of the heart of God coming into our church that now it's starting to go out. Because there's just not enough room for it here. We have enough room to go out into the community. One of the weaknesses of this kind of organization for a church is it's easy for people to become passive consumers. So while you are going to have a large base attendance and potentially even an off-campus virtual attendance, that can be largely made up of passive consumers of whatever the church is producing. Community can quickly feel shallow. It's just a lot of people to keep track of. It's a lot of work to get done once you start pushing ministry out. And it can be very challenging to maintain authentic relationships. Relationships starts to niche down to leadership teams, volunteer teams, and there's a chance that out of just natural self-preservation, we max out a certain number of relationships. So even if a person's in leadership, they can only have close relationship with 50 people. There's probably a number for that. So when you've got 1,000+ people in your church and the people they're leading alone number 50 people, then those 50 people have to get really good at leading another 50 people. And if that's not facilitated really well, it's going to lead to cracks in the system and people getting lost. Decision-making at this level has to be really institutionalized. It has to be really focused. If there are too many voices, nothing's going to get done, and we've got too many people that we can't just afford to sit around. So it's going to be very departmentally focused. Just somebody walking in off the street who has something to say is not going to have a voice in this space because it just doesn't work. It's not healthy for the whole. You can't just walk into a church and get a job here. You'd have to like apply and go through their hiring system in order to make sure you meet the needs of everything else that's in place, because you have a lot of moving parts. You can't just throw in a whole new vision. Whoever comes on needs to be part of the current vision so we can maintain that health. What can happen because staff get so niched down on a specific vision and ideas, they can become siloed. They can be separate from the congregation. And because there's so many steps between them and a person attending their church, it may be hard to connect at all. There may be a huge gap between what the leadership experience as what's happening in the church as they're moving everything forward, and with the person walking through the church, walking through church doors or passively consuming online. They're going to have two wildly different ideas about what's going on in that church, and it's going to get difficult to have relationship. It's not a bad thing. It's just something to be aware of. And that if we lean too hard, we want to be aware that that gap is there. When we're not, that's when it gets tricky. However, there's a lot of healthy, wonderful things about this model of church, this size. Small communities within the church have a huge network and opportunity to benefit from, and they can stay relational. When people choose to participate, there's a lot to participate in, and there's plenty of ways to get connected and have relationship. When the leadership communicates vision clearly, it can reduce the gap between the average person and the leadership team, and that can create an even stronger sense of connection, and people feel like they're a part of a mission that impacts more than just themselves, which can be very desirable. There can be a healthier turnover for positions because they're so structured and job specific that as a staff member leaves, there's a large pool of people who would be able to step in and take that position, which can help sustain the longevity of the ministry. So we've talked about big picture. Now let's talk about understanding your role in your church based on church size, or figuring out what kind of church you want to attend based on the experience you want to have at church. Or as a church leader, what your goals could be based on your church size. A small church, let's look at strengths. Small churches, you bring relationship connection and investment. So if you're looking for a community where everything is relational, everything is chitty-chatty, big decisions are made in passing in the hall, small church is for you. If you're a growing leader and you want a place where you can quickly jump into a leadership role and test out some vision, small churches for you. They have a high need for volunteers. If you're a church leader and a pastor who wants to have a more relationship focused leadership style, small churches for you. If you're like, I don't know about systems, I really want the flexibility to just kind of go and like bend and flex, then a small church is for you. That's where you're going to be happiest. That's where you're going to feel like your gifts are most accepted. Medium churches, you're really good at building new systems and impacting culture. This is a fantastic size church for someone who wants a little bit more structure, but still wants that flexibility. It's what I would call the best of both worlds church, which is why a lot of people like it. You've got relationship and you've got system. There is some casual nature, like it's easier for naturally skilled people to rise in leadership because there's generally always opportunity, but you're also going to have some relational investment that's going to hold on to the original vision. Like it's the sweet spot. It's the best of both worlds. It is going to be what my husband described as an awkward teenager, okay? An awkward teenager is a mid-sized church in the sense that some things work, some things don't. Clothes fit today, they don't fit tomorrow. I'm really, really hungry and had an emotional breakdown. Oh, but now I figured out how to communicate. The brain is growing quickly. We're testing out relationships all the time. So it can feel unstable and insecure in that sense. But at the same time, being a teenager is a lot of fun. Like you are ready to take risks, try new things, and you've got a driver's license. So you could actually get somewhere. So if you like that vibe, DM Church is for you. A church leader that's going to be really good in this kind of environment is one that is highly relational, but leans a little bit entrepreneur. They're like, I love systems, but I want it to be highly relational. I want to be like, I kind of want to have my hands in everything, but I'm not going to be able to get there. So like, I want 4 or 5 good people around me so that we can really make this happen. And I think in that size of church, you're going to feel really confident. You're going to feel like, yep, this is working. A large church, you bring consistency through stability. So there's a lot. I love large churches. There was a season my husband and I attended a larger church because we were kind of burnt out from church and ministry in general. We had some church hurt, but we still wanted to be a part of a community. And that's just one example of someone who really benefits from a large church. We wanted an opportunity to be kind of invisible, but plugged in. And so that larger church definitely ministered to us and healed our hearts during that time. Because if we had been in a smaller church, we would have potentially been asked to volunteer or like identified as leadership or something like that. And we weren't in a place where we wanted that. We wanted other people who were really good at doing what they were doing, leading that church, to lead it so that we could take times to heal and focus on our personal relationship. So, and then that was us from a leader's standpoint. What church should we want to attend? But then there's just, maybe you've got a new believer who's just got some basic things they need to learn about church culture, community, the Bible. A large church is going to have a lot of educational opportunities, community opportunities that are going to be fun and well thought out and facilitated by people who really care and have time to invest. This is a fantastic place to get plugged in if you want to. You're going to have youth groups full of people that are just having a great time. So, and you don't need to worry of like, is it going to happen on Wednesday or is it not? Is the leader going to change tomorrow or is it not? For the most part, because of that stability. So it's a great place to get connected to the church when you're ready to be in community, but you're not sure how to do that. And larger churches are really good at teaching people how. There's less emotional messiness because there's so many people that relationships can stay a little more surface level until you get into your life group. And once you get into your life group, then you can have the structure to really dig in and get into the meat of some relationships. People attending an 800-person church may not be ready to jump right into that. They may want some time, and that's beautiful and that's good. We want to meet people where they're at. We want all sizes of church so we can meet the needs of everyone. Mega church. The way that Timothy Keller categorizes what you bring that's super valuable is you build the relational micro church inside the big machine. I don't know how I feel about that. What I think the mega church does, it provides inspiration and sort of guiding posts for churches to follow. Once you get to a mega church status, you're not just leading people anymore. You're starting to lead churches, church cultures. That's a totally different mission, and it's so important. You share collective vision on not just what's happening in your community, but what you see on a broader scale, and you have the platform to make it heard so that people in 0 to 40 churches and everything in between can synchronize our watches, if you will, with the Holy Spirit and what they're doing and get inspired and get ideas, and also kind of take, I like what God's doing on a big scale here. Now I'm going to get it really customized to the size of my church. I'm not saying that the large churches are the ones that decide what the Holy Spirit's doing. Not what I'm saying. I'm saying that they do tend to provide inspiration and forward vision for churches that maybe would feel really isolated without those bigger churches connecting us all together. Like the worship songs we sing are generally written by these bigger churches. We go and we sing them in our smaller churches. We're all connected and unified. Doesn't mean a small church can't produce a song. It just means that we're more likely going to be singing a song produced by a larger church. And that's awesome. But also, let's sing songs produced by smaller churches. It's just knowing that a big part of that mega church role is to be inspirational and vision casting for the collective, for the region, if you will. Okay, so here's what can happen if we walk into a church expecting the wrong thing. If we walk into a small church, a 100-person church, expecting 800-person impact, let's say you're a musician and you do want to write that famous worship song. You walk into a 100-person church, you're going to have quick access to people who are like, oh, we love that for you. We'll celebrate, like they're going to disciple you and mentor you and celebrate you. But they don't have a recording studio contract or access to those kinds of resources that's going to launch you. And so that's going to be something you're going to kind of have to build on your own. That can be a beautiful setup for a specific type of worship artist. But knowing that going in, like if you go to a small church, it's like, oh, they have nothing to offer me because they can't get me, I can't do a worship concert here. There's not enough people. Like that's not an accurate way to interpret that church community. It's like this community is here for relationship, and they're really, really good at that. If you want to go the other way, you're going to need to work your way up into a bigger church or produce solo. It's not about what's right and wrong. It's about having reasonable expectations. Another example of that could be if you're a pastor that trained in a 800-person church. You were trained to facilitate systems, to delegate, to all of that stuff. And then you get put into the leadership of a 300-person church, you are going to struggle because you haven't trained for the highly relational equity decision-making system that is going to be very valuable in a church that size. It's going to be a huge culture jump, and you may feel unappreciated when you suggest that systems should be done a certain way, and they push back on like, well, that's not how we do things here. That kind of resonates. Yes, we always want to be changing and growing, but also it's a little bit true in a relational church of 200 people, relationships trump systems. And so if you want to be a systems focused leader, you probably shouldn't prioritize being in a 200-person church. And the opposite is true, which we already talked about. Okay. Another wonderful thing about all the different church sizes is each one sort of has a different mission, a different target. So if you're on a leadership team of a church, take a look at how many people are in your church and consider what the mission God might have for your church is. Are you a 1,000 plus person church? Then you need to be casting vision for more than just your church. Are you a 100-person church? Then we need to be figuring out how to have dinner together on a regular basis. Are you in the 200 to 400 category? Let's embrace our awkward teenageness and not get down on that, and like, let's get messy, make mistakes, try something new. A big thing that can happen in the 200 to 400 is, do we split to two services? Knowing that Timothy Keller says that when you split into two services, it's a solution for this size group, but you're essentially breaking into two small churches, and knowing how that's going to impact your culture. Let's not hold on to the illusion that we're not going to have some logistical division happen by splitting into two services. Like, you are going to have logistical division happen. So how do you want to facilitate that? How do you want to meet that need? None of this is right or wrong. I want to lift that. I want to lift it and make church size neutral, but informative. Like, take a look at how many people are in your church. Take a look at your staffing availability. Another thing that could be happening is you could be in a 200-person church with a really healthy, established system and really healthy leadership. That might be an indicator that it's time to push for some growth. Maybe not. Maybe you're like, nope, we're really healthy and really stable, but we know that if we push for growth, we're going to have to lean systems, and we don't want to do that. So we're going to stay right here. And instead of growing, because there's so many people coming into our church, instead of becoming a bigger church, we're going to split, and we're going to create two churches with the same small, healthy culture is another option. So I'm really curious what all this makes you think about. For me in general, it was so encouraging. It gave so much clarity about how I can celebrate each different church when I walk through the door. How can I celebrate what they're doing and not compare that one is better than the other? When I'm a part of big churches, it's like, yep, you're casting vision. That's awesome. When I'm part of small churches, I'm like, we're having casserole potlucks. That is success. The big church isn't, but they're both succeeding, and it just looks very different, and we need everyone. So let me know what you think about this. Let me know your thoughts on it, and potentially any other research you've done on this topic. I'm very interested by it. The point is, in terms of the church we dream of, in our current church communities, what are we dreaming of? Which size church did you hear me talking about that made you go, yeah, that's the church that I want to be a part of? And knowing that we need all sizes, but notice which one you feel drawn to and called to and why, and then figure out how to get there. Another thing is, in the church that we dream of, there are options. There's multiple manifestations of good. So if you've been hurt by a 400-person church, try an 800-person church or a 100-person church. You're going to have a different experience. There's not one right way to do church, and this is just an outline. It's not a rule book. So I'm really excited for how you guys are going to use this information and use it to grow your churches, challenge yourselves, and heal relationships. I will see you soon.